life around us. Biodiversity is essential to our survival. The vast array of species and ecosystems in our lands and seas shields us from the shocks of extreme changes in our climate. Biodiversity regulates the atmosphere for clean air and fresh water. It makes our lands fertile and supplies us with medicines. But if we lose more and more species, the more our ecosystems weaken, and the more we threaten our own survival. The Philippines is one of only 17 countries in the entire world that is mega diverse. Of the 52,000 species, more than half of them are unique in all the world. If we lose them, the world loses them. Biodiversity is also important to our economy. The viability of our agriculture, fisheries, and forestry sectors depends on our biodiversity, providing jobs and helping us achieve inclusive growth for our people. Biodiversity provides an estimated 2.9 trillion pesos per year in benefits and services to our economy. But we are continuously threatening our biodiversity with overexploitation, destruction of natural habitats, climate change, pollution, and introduction of invasive alien species. Our future depends on us arresting these threats. Investment in this crucial area has been alarmingly small. From 2008 to 2013, our country's level of spending for biodiversity conservation was only about 4.9 billion pesos annually, equivalent to a mere 0.08% of GDP and 0.31% of the national budget. As a party to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Philippines has formulated a roadmap towards biodiversity conservation. That is, the Philippine Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. Implementing and achieving the plan's targets will contribute to realizing the country's Ambisyon Natin 2040 and the administration's 10-point agenda. It also contributes to achieving the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets and the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. The Philippine Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan requires an investment of 23.9 billion pesos every year until 2028. Set against our government's current allocation of 4.9 billion, there is an 80% financing gap that urgently needs to be filled to successfully implement the plan. The Biodiversity Finance Initiative, or BioFin in the Philippines, helps close the funding gap for the implementation of our national plan. BioFin brings a new way of biodiversity management through sound finance and economic thinking. This initiative aims to mobilize new resources to finance nature and sustainable development, deliver better and more efficient biodiversity outcomes, improve spending efficiency, and choose current investments that save money for the future. The BioFin process uses a series of assessments to help create the blueprint for conservation, the biodiversity policy and institutional review, the biodiversity expenditure review, a financial needs assessment, and the biodiversity finance plan. BioFin is initiating several finance solutions envisioned to mobilize resources amounting to 20 billion pesos by 2020. Finance solutions are strategies aimed at opening multiple sources of funding to allow the Philippines to implement our national and local biodiversity finance plans and projects. They can be used alone or in different combinations to create new products that can make biodiversity projects more effective. For finance solutions aimed at supporting national agencies, moves will be made to develop an investment program for protected areas, realign DE&R budgets, help advocate for increased funding among other national government agencies, state colleges, and universities, maximizing the Integrated Protected Areas Fund and Environmental Trust funds. For finance solutions aimed at strengthening local government action, the plan aims to increase LGU's own resources of revenues for locally managed protected areas, improve access for earmarked funds, and fund transfers for projects. For finance solutions involving the general public, the plan envisions crowdfunding among citizens and mobilizing the diaspora community. For finance solutions targeted to the private sector, the plan aims to tap corporate social responsibility programs, harness public-private partnerships for the protected areas sector, explore impact investments, and create new sources of revenues from sales of gaming apps and other products. BioFin helps foster better communication and collaboration between government, civil society, and the private sector. It raises the importance of nature in national planning and budgeting for sustainable development. It also fosters knowledge sharing and cooperation among countries. With BioFin, we will be able to plan and implement innovative solutions to finance conservation and protect our biodiversity for ourselves today and in the future. BioFin, Finance for Nature.
Diri sa kiluhan, diri ginasizing ang kasag. Ang pigado nga klase ginahiwalay. Kag ang okay, amo na siya ang amon nga ginaluto. Ang unod sini 40 kilos. Lutoon sa 30 minutes. 30 minutes lang steam. Pabahawon, ilatag diri. Diri ilatag. Pabahawon gid siya tudo, hindi pag iladahon samtang hindi gid siya nga daw cold na gid. Kaya mo nagani gina electric fan na namon kay dapat ma-cold daw cold gid ang lawas ang kasag.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we formally begin, we wish to inform our audience of the following house rules for the smooth conduct of this morning's activity. We wish to kindly request everyone to kindly mute your microphone if you are not speaking to avoid unwanted noise and feedback. A question and answer session will commence after the panel discussion, and all questions and comments shall be directed to the Q&A box for those in the meeting room and to the comment section for those streaming via Facebook Live. Please make sure to state your name and your organization before your question or your comment so that we can address it properly afterwards. We shall gather the questions to be read by the moderator during the panel discussion as well. For everyone's information, this webinar is being recorded and streamed via the official Facebook pages of UNDP Philippines. You can find us at UNDP Philippines or at undp.ph. Thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to everyone's cooperation. Okay, so welcome to the Youth for Climate Action virtual forum. We are honored and grateful that you have taken time to join us today. My name is Charlene Balan of the UNDP Philippines, and I am your host for this morning's program. Tomorrow is the biggest global day for positive environmental action. The World Environment Day is celebrated every year on June 5th to raise awareness and generate action on a pressing environmental issue. This day offers an opportunity to reflect on accomplishments and renew our resolve in overcoming the environmental challenges facing the world today. Held annually since 1974, the World Environment Day is a vital platform for promoting progress on the environmental dimensions of the Sustainable Development Goals. This year's theme is ecosystem restoration under the campaign Reimagine, Recreate, and Restore. The official hashtags for the day are hashtag Generation Restoration and hashtag World Environment Day. This year, the day will also serve as a formal launch of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration from 2021 to 2030. Our world's ecosystems are in danger, but they can be restored, and it will be the collective steps we take to ensure that they are given the space to thrive. The 2021 World Environment Day Global Campaign in the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration aimed to rally the urgent need for the action needed to prevent, halt, and reverse the loss of ecosystem loss. While a decade sounds like a long time, it is in these next 10 years that scientists tell us that matter most in preventing catastrophic climate change and bending the curve on biodiversity loss. With the campaign Reimagine, Recreate, and Restore, we strive for people and organizations to look beyond World Environment Day. We hope to create a global movement that will last us a decade and beyond. And we need you, the youth, to help us in this advocacy. So we're very happy to have all of you here with us today. We have over 700 registrants via our Zoom registration link. I think for now we have 200 participants, and we are very happy that you're with us. To formally launch this morning's program, we will all hear from the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program in the Philippines, Dr. Selva Ramachandran. Dr. Ramachandran is a Malaysian national and a seasoned development practitioner prior to his appointment at the UNDP Philippines. He served as the UNDP resident representative and country director of UNDP Sudan, UNDP country director in Libya, chief of Northeast Asia and Mekong Division of the Regional Bureau of Asia and the Pacific in New York, and UNDP country director in Yemen. Esteemed guests, allow me to turn over the floor to Dr. Selva Ramachandran of UNDP Philippines. Over to you, Dr. Selva.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cha. It's so wonderful to be here and meeting you all through Zoom. Let me start with the protocol. And first, I would like to say, dear friends, both young and hard partners in climate action and conservation, Undersecretary Annalisa Tay, very happy to see you are participating. Mr. Ludwig from Climate Change Commission and my colleague, Jonathan Gilman. This is a fantastic day. A very good morning to all of you. I'm so happy to be part of this Youth for Climate Action virtual forum. It warms my heart to see so many of you joining today, near and far. And I'm happy to see you all, albeit virtually. Our activity this morning is the first of two engagements that UNDP Philippines is organizing in celebration of this year's World Environment Day, which falls on June 5th. The World Environment Day is the United Nations flagship day for promoting awareness and action for the environment all over the world. This annual celebration has become the largest platform for our environmental advocacy, spurring important discourse such as this activity and inspiring millions to rethink our relationship with the planet and reconsider the system on which we have built global economic growth. Aptly titled Reimagine, Recreate, Restore, this year's theme focuses on ecosystem restoration and resetting our relationship with nature. Ecosystem restoration pertains to the recovery of ecosystems that have been degraded or destroyed, as well as conserving the ecosystem that are still intact. It can take many forms, such as growing trees, greening cities, coastal cleanups, big and small efforts that contribute to the healing and recovery of the environment. In 2020, in a span of few months, we witnessed the world drastically transitioned to a new normal, prompted by a pandemic that had zoonotic origins transmitted from animals to humans. While we welcome the distribution of COVID-19 vaccine, here and in many countries, we are yet to abate the spread of the virus fully. In fact, the virus continues to threaten our lives, livelihoods, and our decades-long development gains. The outbreak of the virus is not sudden. Scientists have long predicted the inevitability of a pandemic like COVID-19 for years because of the ever greater pressure for we humans put on the nature. COVID-19 was rather another proof that shows how human life hangs in balance with nature and the planet. Halfway through the year, we are seeing flickers of light and the end of very dark tunnel. But to fully spur recovery and restore what is left our ecosystem, we need a whole of society response. Given the interconnected nature of the problems we are dealing with, we must aim at a systemic change. In fact, in 2020 UNDP's Human Development Report, it was noted that countries will have to make significant strides to achieve human development that does not cost the earth. Today, we are at crossroads. We have an extraordinary opportunity as we recover from the pandemic to stop the unsustainable development and set a new transformational path. As the youth makes up 20% of the world's population, 30 million strong in the Philippines alone, we hope that you can help us in both finding and taking the new path. It is your future at stake, and we recognize the importance of making sure that the voice of youth is just not just heard, but also highlighted in the discourse on how we can build forward better and greener. Now, more than ever, the young generation is most aware and conscious about climate action. In the recently conducted series of youth consultation workshops done by UNDP in the Asia Pacific region through the Movers program, the climate emergency and conflict and disasters were consistently regarded by youth respondents as a top area of concern, both at the regional and national levels. And while there is concern, the climate situation and post-COVID recovery also came out the top topics the youth is most hopeful about. In the last 2 weeks, we call on Filipino youth on social media and through various youth networks and organizations to join us in a discussion on climate action. Your presence today is already a strong testament to the importance that youth, the young generation, are placing on the future and the stewardship of the planet, two topics that are intertwined and are mutually inclusive of each other. We have invited a number of young representatives from different key sectors to discuss how the youth can contribute to climate action in the country. I hope that this activity becomes a platform for you to have a better and stronger sense of responsibility for the planet. We also encourage you to participate and to learn how you can engage in climate action efforts outside this forum. There is little time and much to be done, but with our collective efforts, we can shape the world that we want and the future that we want. I greet you all an advance happy Environment Day. Let's keep building back better and greener. Thank you very much and wish you a productive discussion, and I look forward to participating in it. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Selva. And as Dr. Ramachandran stated, human development in this new age will require a whole of society approach. And that is why we have gathered all of you young people today for an in-depth discussion on how we can build back better and greener. Today, we are also honored to be supported by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, one of the most steadfast partners in climate action in the country. Attorney Analisa Rebueltate, Undersecretary for Finance, Information System, and Climate Change of the DENR, is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Commerce, major in Marketing Management from the De La Salle University. She finished her Bachelor of Laws at the University of the Philippines. After law school, she joined the Department of Environment and Natural Resources as an attorney. Her government service as a lawyer includes serving as the Executive Director for Adjudication Board of the Department of Agrarian Reform and a Director for Legal Services of the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council. She served as Assistant Secretary for Legal Services and Assistant Secretary for Foreign Assisted and Special Projects Office. She also served as Undersecretary and Chief of Staff of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources from 2011 to 2016. She was also designated as Supervising Undersecretary for Mining and Environment. Here we have the Honorable Undersecretary Annalisa to deliver an opening message to mark today's celebration of World Environment Day. Over to you, Undersecretary.
Thank you, Char, for the very generous introduction to Dr. Selva Ramachandran, resident representative in UNDP Philippines, to colleagues from UNDP Philippines, our DNR colleagues also here, and to everyone who is joining us today, our youth leaders, fellow environmental warriors. A pleasant morning to each of you. The World Environment Day takes place every year on June 5 to promote global awareness and action for the environment. Over the years, this has grown to be the largest international platform for environmental public outreach and is celebrated by millions of people across the world. This year's observance of World Environment Day will be on the theme of ecosystem restoration and will focus on resetting our relationship with nature. And this will also mark the formal launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021 to 2030. The COVID-19 pandemic is evidence that our health is inextricably linked with our environment. Our failure to protect and realize our relationship with nature has increased not only the degradation of our ecosystems, but also of our risk of infectious diseases emerging. More particularly in the Philippines, the prevailing conditions brought by COVID-19 have also worsened the impacts of climate change, exposing particularly the vulnerable sectors to these impacts, our women and youth. Our women and youth have fewer resources and information available to address environmental and health-related disasters, making them particularly vulnerable to projected climate change impacts. The study entitled Climate Landscape Analysis for Children in the Philippines, conducted by UNICEF in 2017, recommends that young people must be equipped with understanding of climate change adaptation and environmental sustainability in order to shape and participate in the transition to a low-carbon society. We are grateful that in this year's commemoration of World Environment Day, we are highlighting the voice of the youth, the future stewards of the planet, in a discourse on how we can build our planet better. We are hearing the different initiatives of our youth today as they volunteer in restoration and environmental initiatives and even devising and launching their own, just so we can reach a wider public in raising awareness in our advocacy. We are happy and very hopeful that a lot of our youth today are very active in environmental and climate action. We hope to see more of you, and with people like you, I am certain that we can still see a green and sustainable future. We acknowledge the very important role of our youth in our fight against climate change. We want you to take active participation in different environmental and climate campaigns. We need your support, particularly in pushing for genuine behavioral and transformational shifts in mindsets and lifestyles. Your increasing and social and environmental awareness have the power to transform our societies towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient, and sustainable future. So thank you so much, and I wish every success to this endeavor. Good morning again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Te. And again, we are truly grateful to DNR for the partnership and the support. Before we continue to the very exciting panel discussion that we will have with our youth leaders, we will first share a very important youth initiative that UNDP is spearheading in the region to encourage young participants to be knowledgeable about the Sustainable Development Goals and the ways through which you can participate. The presentation will be led by Joanna Eroba, UNDP Philippines' Youth Engagement Officer. She will introduce the Regional Movers Program, a platform for the youth. After which, Joanna will be followed by Alisa Carrion of the UNDP Philippines' Climate Action Program team to share some insights on the recently held youth consultation workshops in the Asia Pacific region. Without further ado, I'll turn over the floor to Joanna and Ali for this very brief presentation before we move on to the panel discussions. Over to you, Jo and Ali.
Thank you, Char. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Yes. As Char mentioned, I'm Jo. I'm the Youth Engagement Officer of UNDP. And I wanted to talk to you first about what we do for and with young people in UNDP here in the Philippines and also at the regional level in Asia Pacific. So in the Philippines, we have our flagship youth program, which is called Youth Collab, and we support young people in developing their own solutions towards the acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals through leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship. But we also recognize that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It can not for all young people, but you can get or you can have entrepreneurial skills. So this is why we led and introduced the Movers program. So the Youth Collab team, the Youth Collab program founded the Movers program along with this curriculum. And we want to mobilize young people across the Asia Pacific region to raise awareness about the SDGs and other cross-cutting themes. So we want to help young people develop entrepreneurial mindsets by organizing and facilitating Movers workshops in their own community. So this is a grassroots-led initiative. Think of it as a training of trainer or a networking program. If I teach you about the SDGs or other themes, you can get the skills and teach the same to your own community, maybe your friends, your family members, your schoolmates, etc. And we currently have over 9 modules now, including 2 modules on climate action. We also have some modules for employability and digital branding. We also have one on gender and a whole lot more. So I invite you all to go to the Movers website. So that's youthcollab.com/movers. And we also want to invite you to become a mover yourself. So how do you do this? You attend a Movers workshop online or offline. Obviously, not right now, we're mostly doing the workshops online. And as soon as you complete at least one workshop, at least one module, you can apply to become a mover. You can head on to bit.ly/joinmovers. That's also on your screens. And you will then receive the Movers Toolkit, complete with the instructions, the modules that you can use when you facilitate your own Movers workshop. And when you're ready, you can organize your own Movers workshop in your community. So you can invite your friends, your partners, even your parents or your siblings at home. And you can also become part of the regional Movers community. So right now it's growing. There's, I think, more than 13,000 young people in Asia Pacific, and we're still growing. We're currently expanding the Movers program in the Philippines. So we hope that you can join us. Early in the year, we also conducted a consultation with young people to help UNDP in its next strategic direction at the regional level. And so we conducted the Movers program specifically for that, which was called The World We Want. So I will invite Ali to tell us more about what the youth are saying about about the world that they want. So over to you, Ali.
Joe. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So, before I present the results of the World We Want workshop, you are probably wondering, what is this workshop all about? So, the World We Want is an interactive workshop with a series of fun activities, really fun actually. This includes role plays. We also have self reflection exercises and the plenary and group discussions. So, so with that, we really wanted the World We Want workshop to be a platform wherein we can, what do you call this? Sorry, we can reflect together with the youth about their role and the role of UNDP for us to understand and empathize with the priorities of the youth of today towards the future that they want to see. So with that, let me present or share with you the results of the workshops as mentioned by Joe. So what you have on your screen at the moment are the top trends that youth are most hopeful about in the next 5 to 10 years. So the dark green bars represent the Asia Pacific responses, whereas the lighter green ones represent the responses from the Filipino youth. And as you can see, amongst the 8 thematic areas, post-COVID recovery is their top choice. And I think this is very apt and timely, right, as we are still experiencing the pandemic at the moment. The next is the most worried about topic of the youth in the next 5 to 10 years. And if you can observe, the responses shifted on the left side of the graph, with climate emergency now being the top choice of the youth. And this goes for both the regional and the national responses. So with this, if you can recall, the top 3 trends on those 2 topics for the most hopeful about, it's post-COVID recovery. We also have digital inclusion and the financing, growth, work, future economies. And then for the most worried about topic, conflict and disaster came third, followed by globalization, geopolitics, power, and the first choice or the top pick, unfortunately, is climate emergency. So with this, we wanted to ask, what are the current questions of the youth at the moment? And these are some of the insights that we've received. Will we still be alive? Are we going to have another pandemic? Will we have food to sustain everyone? Will the air still be breathable and safe? So if you can see, these questions also are reflective of the top choices that and the responses of the youth as previously presented. So with this, we were also interested to learn about the insights on the issues that the youth are passionate to work on. And as you can see on your screen, they've provided several responses such as quality education, social entrepreneurship, gender equality, and we also have environment, health, youth engagement, climate change, and many more. So these are various responses coming from the youth from different backgrounds. So with this type of responses, let me end this presentation with a challenge for our youth of today, especially those who are with us this morning. How would you use your ability to address the issue that you are most concerned or most passionate about? And we hope through our activity this morning, UNDP and the rest of our partners will enable you to address this challenge. So with that, thank you and good morning. Over to you, Char.
Thank you so much, Joe and Ali. And the results of the consultations really show the level of importance and awareness that the youth place on climate-related issues. Just the interest that we have garnered from this activity alone, having so many young people register and having almost 300 young people with us this morning already goes to show that this is a priority for everyone. And as mentioned by Joanna, we are hoping that you can join our Movers program. We will be announcing an activity related to climate action later on. So there will be a climate action workshop hosted by the Movers program next week. We will be sharing the registration details at the end of this panel discussion. And it's really inspiring to know that so many young people are actually wanting to take steps to contribute to the advocacy and to contribute to climate action here in the country. So without further ado, we will be turning over the floor to our panelists. I know that you have joined us today because you want to hear what these panelists will say about their specializations and the focus topics that they are engaged in. So our first moderator, this panel discussion will be moderated by two very, very young women. The first moderator is Abigail Kitma. She is an Ibaloy Igorot from Baguio City, currently working with Tebteba on national and international advocacy on indigenous people's rights. She is currently a member of the UN Youth Advisory Board as well. Thank you so much, Abby, for joining us this morning and for agreeing to be one of our moderators. The next moderator is Joy Roba, our youth engagement specialist. You've seen her a while ago. She has already spoken. She supports the country office's efforts to empower young people through leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So, Joe and Abby will be shaping the discussions with the panelists this morning. And as mentioned, we have invited a number of young representatives from across different climate action areas to make sure that we cover every important topic that the youth and the general public can support for especially in time for World Environment Day. So our first speaker will talk about biodiversity conservation and the role of creatives in the advocacy. Gab Mejia is a Filipino conservation photographer and an environmental storyteller. He is a National Geographic explorer covering stories on nature, wildlife, the climate crisis, and indigenous people. He's a contributor to National Geographic Your Shot and has published stories in National Geographic, CNN, Nikon, Worldwide Fund for Nature, Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, and the United Nations Development Program. He's also a 2019 Jackson Wild Media Lab Fellow and a Nikon Asia Ambassador, having presented stories in several TED Talks. He's the co-founder and communications and outreach lead of Youth Engaged in Wetlands, the global youth network advocating for the conservation of wetlands and natural climate solutions around the world. Hi, Gab. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Char. Thank you so much for having the space here.
Thank you. Our next panelist will talk about biodiversity friendly enterprises, or BDFEs. We have Mr. Eric Avellino of the DENR Biodiversity Management Bureau. John Eric Avellino is a graduate of BS Development Communications at the University of the Philippines in Los Baños. He first entered the DENR in 2019 as an information officer under the Coral Triangle Support Partnership Project funded by the USAID. He was then assigned to the Asian Development Bank to support to the Coral Triangle Initiative implementation in 2011 and in 2015. He finished his master's degree in sustainability science in 2018 at the University of Tokyo in Japan, where he studied the effectiveness of marine protected areas, or MPAs, in the case of El Nido Taytay MPA. Currently, he is working for the Coastal and Marine Division and Services as the focal for the implementation of the biodiversity-friendly enterprises under the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program of the DENR. Hi, Eric. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Char. Happy to be here.
Good morning. Our next panelist is Dave. Dave is the Executive Director of the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation, the nonprofit taking care of Danjugan Island, a wildlife sanctuary with environmental education and ecosystem programs located in Negros Occidental in the Philippines. Beyond Danjugan Island, Dave and their team are facilitating technical support for a network of marine protected areas, local governments, and communities that depend on healthy coastal ecosystems. Dave and their team are also implementing projects funded by USAID, GIZ, and the EU, recently focused on reducing ocean plastics. These include advocating for zero waste and circular enterprises, for a wala-usik economy, including micro businesses such as sari-sari stores, carinderias, and cafes that are innovating to reduce single-use plastic waste from their operations. Dave was a 2016 professional fellow on environmental sustainability in Oregon and received a diploma on sustainable business from the Swedish Institute Management Program in 2020. So thank you for joining us, Dave. And I think I mispronounced Danhugan Island a while ago. But thank you, Dave, and we look forward to your presentation later on.
Mayong hapon from Danhugan in Negros.
Magandang umaga. Our next panelist is Miss Christine Joy Gina Agudo, a proud Talaandig. She finished the 2-year ladderized program of the University of Southeastern Philippines, Pamuluan Center of IP Education with a degree of Bachelor of Arts in Peace Education. Subsequently, she pursued a bachelor's degree in secondary education at Central Mindanao University. Aside from being a daughter of the tribal chieftain of the Talaandig community of Pangantukan Bukidnon, she is also an active youth leader who co-founded the Portulin Tribal Talaandig Association in Pangantukan Bukidnon. Currently, she is the planning and admin personnel of the CBPM INREMP project, also a cultural and education committee head of PTTA, and an active advisor and coordinator of the Kulahi Tribal Youth Organization. Welcome, Christine Joy. Thank you for joining us. Magandang umaga. Our next panelist is Prince Ventura of Where Forward. Prince Jimdel Ventura is a climate reality leader and a 2021 climate ambassador of the Global Youth Climate Network, who focuses on addressing the environmental and socioeconomic impacts of fashion. He is also a Youth for Sustainable Cities ambassador who engages the youth with the Sustainable Development Goals to create and innovate solutions towards sustainable urban development. Moreover, Prince is the founder and the CEO of fashion tech startup Where Forward and the spokesperson of Fashion Revolution Philippines. Thank you for joining us, Prince, and welcome to the panel.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Good morning. Our last panelist is from the UNDP Philippines, from the Low Carbon Urban Transport Project of UNDP Philippines. Miko Nasino is the policy support component lead of LCUTS, Low Carbon Urban Transport Systems in the Philippines project, a joint initiative of UNDP and the DOTR and the Global Environmental Facility. Miko is also the founder of the Behavioral Insights Network Philippines, a growing network of professionals from various disciplines with an interest in leveraging learnings in applied behavioral sciences in various sectors, such as government, businesses, and development. Thank you, Miko. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Char. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here.
Good morning. Before I turn it over to Abby and Joe again, I would like to again remind our audience to use the Zoom Q&A section to submit your questions to the panelists. We will have an opportunity to ask them during the Q&A, which will take place after the panel discussion. Thank you for your cooperation. And again, the floor is yours, Joe and Abby.
Thank you, Char. And hello again to our panelists. I'm so excited for this morning's discussion, not just because we've invited climate activists and people who are passionate about climate action, but because most of you, if not all, are young people. So this is, to me, very exciting, and it's great to finally be able to have young people who are passionate about climate action come together. So yeah, I'm joined by Abby from the UN Youth Advisory Board today. And to start the conversation, well, the panelists will have time to share their personal advocacies towards climate action. But to start with, we want to ask you each some general or opening questions. So if you can hear from you about your advocacies and how you became interested in your advocacy. So yeah, as a member of the youth sector specifically, what comes to mind when you hear about conservation and climate change, and how did you become interested in this advocacy? So I guess we start, I'd like to ask this question first to Prince, if you can grace the
All right,
call.
thank you, Joanna. So, as a part of the youth sector, hearing about conservation and climate change makes me think about awareness, collective action, and hope. So, growing up, I was taught to put my trash in my pocket or bag when there is no trash bin around and take care of our animals. And since I was 13 years old, I started being an active member and officer of our Youth for Environment in Schools organization, wherein our activities include tree plantings, coastal cleanups, and engagements with the youth and local government. And I even competed and won at the National Youth for Environment Summer Camps Environmental Broadcasting Competition when I was in high school. And it's also the same time when I watched An Inconvenient Truth. It's a documentary film that's raised awareness, international public awareness about global warming. And I'm sure a lot of our attendees right now have also watched that documentary. And so my journey shaped my interest in environmental and climate advocacies. And basically, my work and experience focus on addressing the environmental and socio-economic impacts of fashion and making fashion industry not just sustainable, but also circular. So when we talk about sustainable fashion, we always have to consider the triple bottom line, or the three P's, which are the people, planet, and profit, or alternatively, the three pillars of sustainability, which include the social, environmental, and economic aspects of fashion. So let's be clear that the fashion industry or fashion definitely affects the environment. But sad to say, many people don't know that the fashion industry is extremely wasteful and exploiting. And in fact, it is one of the major polluting industries in the world. And this is highly attributed to the production, distribution, and consumerism of fashion items. And to make our clothes, the fashion industry relies heavily on coal for electricity and heat. And around 97% of the fibers that we have come from virgin material sources, and over 60% of the fabrics we use are made from non-renewable fossil fuels. So after being manufactured, our clothes basically are shipped or flown to their respective destinations, wherein either process also uses fossil fuels. So as a result of this resource-heavy and high-volume supply chain or system, around 10% of the global carbon emissions come from the fashion industry alone. And we are all a part of this. We are all wearing clothes, right? So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation found out that one garbage truck of textiles, including used and unsold clothes and accessories, is burned or sent to landfills every second worldwide. So if you guys are watching us right now, try to reflect how many clothes you've thrown in the bins for the past year. And yes, it's happening. Actually, a lot of fashion companies do destroy or incinerate their unsold inventories or returns instead of just selling them at a lower price or donating them to charity. And come to think of it, like what about our planet? What happens to the planet when we do that, right? So we've also found out that the global clothing production has more than doubled since the year 2000, but about 30% of the clothes that we produce are never sold, while around 40% are rarely worn or never worn again at all. And another research, we found out that almost 30% of Filipinos have thrown away a clothing item after wearing it just once in 2017. And nearly 20% of Filipinos throw away clothes simply because they are more than a few seasons old. So let's talk about our sustainable or unsustainable consumption as Filipinos. And unfortunately, clothes, accessories such as shoes and bags and other textiles take hundreds of years to decompose. And so they only take up space in our landfills for centuries. And as they decompose, they release greenhouse gases, thereby contributing to global warming and polluting the planet even more. And moreover, 20% of our industrial water pollution comes from textile treatments and dyes. And around 8,000 chemicals are being used in the industry and released to our bodies of water, while 500,000 tons of textile microfibers, which are mostly microplastics, go to our oceans and environment every year. And just in recent years, we've been talking a lot about microplastics, right? But we don't know that most of the microplastics that go into our oceans or waterways are coming from our fibers or textiles or clothes. And meanwhile, McKinsey and Company reported just last year in 2020 that the fashion industry is also a significant contributor to biodiversity loss, with its supply chains directly linked to soil degradation, conversion of natural ecosystems, and waterway pollution. And most of its negative impacts on biodiversity comes from three stages in the supply chain. So particularly in the raw material production, in the material preparation and processing, and in the product end of life. And not just that, in the fur industry, a sub-industry of the fashion industry, more than 100 million animals every year, or 3 animals every second, are killed for their fur, including fox and rabbit, among others. And also the leather industry, a sub-industry of the fashion industry, is another story. According to PETA, or the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, more than 1 billion baby and adult animals are being abused and slaughtered every year for their skins, which are then being turned into shoes, bags, wallets, jackets, furniture, and other textiles. So think about the cows, the pigs, horses, crocodiles, snakes, elephants, and other animals being tortured and brutally killed for their skin. Yes, we have actually a lot of animals being raised and slaughtered specifically for their leather. And so, to secure a better present for ourselves and a better future for the next generations, as I mentioned earlier, there is hope, and the youth can actively engage in raising awareness about the environmental impacts of fashion and collaborating with each other in taking climate action.
Thank you so much, Prince. Ayan, everyone. Prince serving us some real facts. And thanks also for sharing your journey. And I think my takeaway was that to answer the question earlier was um, the way that you are brought up shaped your habits, your advocacy and passion towards uh, responsible consumption. And I think this is, as a young person, this is a great point to make to adults to make sure that when we talk to to children and young people, we instill the values of responsible consumption to them. Thanks, Prince. So I'd like to ask the same question to Eric from DENR. So we earlier the question was if you can tell us more about your journey. I know that you worked in the government, so I'm also interested to find out like how you started your journey and how you got to advocating for climate.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I actually, so being not one of the youths anymore, but during my time as a youth, I think before I went before, like, after undergrad, I never really imagined myself working for the conservation sector. But having to experience firsthand, this the impacts of human activities to our coastal resources. So I'm blessed to be able to dive in to see the life underwater. So that actually woke me up into really advocating for conservation. So I think that what's most influenced me into pursuing this career or sector.
Thank you, Eric. Did you say you died?
Yes. coming from the Coastal and Marine Division.
Right.
All of us there are mostly diverse.
Okay. Sana all.
Kaya nga. so we actually encourage everyone to see life underwater. So we're happy
Right.
for people to join us on those trips.
Right. Thank you, Eric. And over to Gab, who is a conservation photographer. And this is not the first time that we've engaged Gab. And I'm sure a lot of people already know your story, but I don't. So I also want to ask you the same question. And how did you get to where you are now in terms of environmental advocacies and conservation?
Well, I think it really came off from, that early childhood development and privilege to be immersed and educated about nature. So my father really inspired, brought me to mountains across Laguna, made me see the mangroves and different wetlands across the Philippines. And I think this local appreciation made me grow up and traveling and exploring the Philippines more. And I think that experience, that childhood experience to grow up in the mountains of the Sierra Madre, Cordilleras, and our beautiful reefs, especially our wetlands. I believe, these places, growing up, seeing these places in real life change. I think when I was still hiking, I was going diving for when I was 13 up until now that I'm 24. And I really saw the changes that were happening. And I really wanted to, we needed to act. Who else is going to act except us, right? And I think that was one of the, the most important points of my life, that I really dedicated my career from sciences and the arts, especially as a photographer, in contributing for conservation and environmental solutions. So I think that was really more of the journey. I think conservation and climate change is our present reality. I think one of the most common misconceptions about this issue is that it's somewhere far off from the future, but we're actually all experiencing it today, from the typhoons, floods, coral bleaching, and droughts. And there's no better time to start, than today, really.
Right. And ang init ngayon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need more trees and shades, especially here in Metro Manila. So thanks, Gab. I guess you also share the same or similar upbringing as Prince. And yeah, and we have a really diverse group of panel members here. So over to Dave also to answer the same question and tell us more about how you became an environmental activist.
Thank you, Johanna. Hello, Gab. Kamusta? Eric. Prince, that was so eloquent, the entire discussion on the impacts of the fashion sector. I'm so happy to listen to you. Thank you for having me here. When I was 15, I think most of us try to find meaning, right? We have a search for meaning and belongingness, like to be able to belong. So in this journey, just to discover ourselves and where we are, when I was 15, nature was very, very important and critical to that, part of my growing up. So parang, when you ask deeper questions about how we live our lives, ultimately, babalik ka, or you go back to nature, because we are part of nature. And I have always asked that question. I know this might be too spiritual, but I've always asked that question: what is our true nature? How are we truly made? What is our purpose on this planet? So if we touch on those very profound questions, so hard to answer, and I still try to answer that, we will ultimately find ourselves in the path of environmental conservation. Because you talk about, what is, when you grow up in a city with screens, on your phone, on your TV, constant barrage of, information, you kind of sometimes, when we're in quarantine, we're like, but my true nature is out there in the mountains, in the beach. Johanna, you miss diving. That's the feeling, that pushes us to learn about sustainability and what we need to protect and why we protect it. I think it's very, very important. And this is beyond the material aspect of conservation, meaning the resources that we're trying to protect. For example, yung issues na discuss ni Prince, but to protect the quality of our water and air. These are the material and the pragmatic concerns that we're already facing, especially amidst climate change. But what I'm adding to this equation is also the non-material benefits, which is the spiritual, the cultural, the aesthetic. These are sometimes not measurable, but these drive us to move towards concrete actions. And I think that's very, very important work. The work that we're doing here is actually a cultural work. It's really changing mindsets and behaviors. And I'm sorry, I think I talked too much, but so happy to
No,
be
it's
here.
okay.
Looking forward to the
Thank you,
discussion.
Dave, and thanks for making a point of, conservation is not just about the physical realm, right? It's so much more, and it affects our overall well-being also. And to me, it's refreshing to hear someone talk about climate in a spiritual um, way. So yeah, and I'll ask the same question to Christine, who's also joining us from the Kulahi band of Talanding tribe. Hi, Christine.
Hi po, Miss Joanna.
Hello po. Maaari niyo po bang ikwento sa amin kung paano yung naging journey niyo? And na-mention kanina na ang tatay niyo daw po ay chieftain ng tribe. So interesting din, if you can tell us more about it.
Hello po sa lahat. So ako po ay isang talaandig. So ako po ay isang anak ng dato dito sa Bukidnon. So nais ko lang ibahagi, pag sinabi kasing conservation, parang natural na lang sa amin yung mga kibali sa perspective ng mga katutubo. Kasi nga, pag sinabi natin yung conservation, parang bahagi na siya ng way of life ng mga katutubo. Kasi nga, culture and nature are inseparable. So yun po yung parang hindi na siya bago na usapin. Yung malaking challenge lang po dito is paano namin masustain, kasi nga napakarami po ng challenges ang mga kabataang lumad o yung mga indigenous people. Kasi nga, example na lang sa education, sa modernization. So yung pinaka-main talaga na rule, parang malaking hamon, no, kung paano mapagpatuloy yung talagang traditional knowledge ng mga kakatutubo. Kasi nga, like for example, iilan lang dito sa atin yung may indigenous people's education na talagang nakaangkop or nakaangkla doon sa traditional knowledge, no? Yung malaking problema is yung parang marami sa mga kabataan ay nakakalimutan na nila yung pagiging katutubo, yung pinaka-principle nila bilang mga katutubo. So, sa akin bilang anak ng isang dato, napakalaking hamon kung paano masustain yung traditional knowledge, ika nga. So, yun po, parang mamaya isa-isahin pa natin.
Salamat po. Yung main takeaway ko kay Christine ay what she said earlier about culture and nature being inseparable. So that also affirms what they've told us earlier about shaping behavior and shifting mindsets. And finally, I invite Miko to also share with us his journey.
Thanks, Joanna. So I guess as the not so young member of the panel here, I guess my journey is quite different in such a way that perhaps I started by saying I'm part of a generation wherein we see private cars, or owning a private car is an aspiration. It's part of, once you reach a certain level in your career, it's one of the things that it's one of your milestones as you grow up. And I guess how did that change happen to me? Similar to Eric, I also did study in the same University of Tokyo, and it was during in my time there wherein I saw a different perspective of how transport could be. I mean, I grew up, taking for granted na okay, it's traffic. Okay, sige, I'll go for what's convenient. Even and convenient meaning I'll just ride my private car. But then again, once you see a different different way of a different perspective, as in the case of my experience in Japan, in Tokyo, wherein uh, even the highest members of society also take public transport. It's clean, and you know you can practically go anywhere around the country without having to use private transport. I mean, that's for me that was mind blowing back in 2014, and when I came back, the, the 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 movement actually was I would say it was just a bit starting, but you know from different walks of life you'll get to encounter people who also happen to have that same realization, and there were a number of groups that sprung up around 2017 2018. Just to mention a few, like Outmobility PH, where I came to know during this journey, who also opened me further to the idea that you know transport could be better, mobility could be better from what we got used to here in the Philippines, and that also emboldened me to as a public policy generalist. I guess I took that leap of faith, you know, to actually participating, working in projects that would actually have more impact in changing our transport system from what it was, as we all know, back before COVID-19 happened, to something that is better and to something that we're seeing at this moment. And that's the reason why I'm here. This project we're in, it's a partnership with the United Nations Development Program and the Department of Transportation, of course, through funding coming from the Global Environment Facility. The idea here basically is for us to be able to create the enabling framework, basically to commercialize low carbon transport modes here in the Philippines, but also be able to establish and institutionalize these systems for the succeeding generations to have a different outlook about how to be able to commute, to go from point A to point B here in the country. Joanna, you're on mute.
Thank you, Miko. It's very interesting to see your how different your journeys are, all the panelists. So, sa side ni Miko, yung work niya ay more policy naman, and you're also working with us. Thank you so much to the panelists for opening the conversation and for letting us into your lives and sharing with us your journey. So I'd like to go deeper and ask each one of you more specific questions about your work, maybe your career or your personal advocacy. So starting with Gab, who again is a conservation photographer. Can you share us a bit, because you shared earlier yung journey mo, and I'd like to go deeper and into your being a conservation photographer and how you convey your advocacy through photos.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joanna. Actually, conservation photography is a genre of documentary that focuses on environmental and conservation issues. So we're here to drive conservation outcomes and impacts through ethical photography. So most of the time, we would be working with conservation organizations like Worldwide Fund for Nature, also United Nations Development Program. We've worked on some stories. And most of the times, actually, we spend our time in the field documenting environmental issues at the forefront, documenting global sea level rise, documenting droughts, documenting fires, sometimes even, as tragic as animals dying, or as tragic as people being displaced because of the impacts of climate change. I remember doing a story for the United Nations Development Program on our tamaraws. So working with UNDP and the Biodiversity Finance Initiative, we were here to document not just our beautiful and our beloved tamaraws, but also about protecting people who protect our flora and fauna. I think for a lot of people, conservation, people would ask, okay, how does conservation photography actually help or drive impacts to biodiversity conservation? And one for the example is actually raising awareness that creates and bridges these gaps that we have, especially for a lot of people. We assume or we presume to think that a lot of people actually know about the Philippine eagle, they know about the tamaraw that there shears, they know about wetlands, they know about forests and oceans. Sometimes it can be just a surface level, but delving into the issues, photography and storytelling is our greatest universal language. For a culturally diverse country, we may speak different tongues, but seeing an image there, or maybe a film, a documentary, it inspires in a way that shows you that you can actually relate to something. Because a lot of the times, one of the most problematic issues with biodiversity conservation is people don't know what the heck the tamara would actually give or benefit you as a person, right? People won't know what the benefits of having a Philippine eagle have for a person, or for a person, for example, in Metro Manila. And I think that's really the importance of conservation photography. Because, in the Philippines, especially where artists are maybe undervalued, or, our art may be appreciated, our photography may be appreciated, but we're truly undervalued. So sometimes there are really no spaces for journalists, for documentaries, workers for environment to actually share these stories. For example, for like the Tamarao, last 2020 in October, one of the last captive bred tamaraws died, Kalibasib. I don't know if you've heard of and read that story with the United Nations Development Program, but we were there to document of how this impacted the whole institution, especially the pandemic, of the effects of the pandemic on our environmental rangers, our environmental defenders. And through the help of collaborating through stories, through visuals, media assets, they were able to raise about +1 million pesos to secure the livelihoods of the environmental defenders and wildlife, the Tamara rangers. So I think that's really the importance of photography and storytelling, to be able to bridge these disconnects that are happening right now. We're a globally polarized society, to think of it. Not a lot of people may be unaware, and I think most of the times people are just naive of the injustices. It's not that they don't care. It's just because they don't know. And I think this is the importance of storytelling and how we can actually connect youth, especially now that we have a very digitalized and connected world, wherein you have social media platforms, you have Instagram, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, and you have all these other platforms that you could use to share not just photos, but also even written word, films that could be relatable for a person. And I think and truth is, honestly, like, conservation photography has helped a lot, especially if you look at it at a grander scale, or a larger scale for other countries in the world. One example is for like the US, and creating petitions and for lobbying governments. For example, once you see a published article on National Geographic, or for acclaimed and credible sources, you start to realize that this is actually happening. This is the truth. This is the realities that we are facing as society in terms of biodiversity conservation. And then the truth is that we're 68% of animal populations have declined since the last half decade. So imagine, after 50 years, almost half of all animal populations have been declining consistently. And constantly, we've been hearing news and studies and photographs of these animals that are going extinct every year. One, for example, is like the northern white rhino in Africa last year. I don't know if you've seen that photos from National Geographic, but it really resonated a lot for people living in Africa, living and related to these stories. And I think that's really the goal of conservation photography, to also foster this growth for pride for our own animals. We know about lions, we know about tigers. Growing up, you may have seen in alphabet books about elephants, giraffes, penguins, but not about Philippine eagles, not about the haribon, not about Philippine crocodile, not about tamarao, not about katala. And communication, you realize that there's really this lack of pride and acceptance and validation of our own natural heritage in our country. And I think maybe last thing to ponder on is that much of conservation work, really, even in photography, there's a lot of risk that involved. For the Philippines, according to the Global Witness Report, we're one of the deadliest countries for environmental defenders, for journalists, and these stories that, for example, for like mining, for droughts, for palm oil plantations in the peatlands. We worked on a story for National Geographic on documenting the effects of the droughts on the Manobo community, the Manobo indigenous tribe, also in Agusan del Sur and the Agusan Marsh. And these impacts is like, you don't see this in the major headlines, because sometimes it is being washed out, or people are just are afraid of their lives to document these places. And I think we really need to foster this community of storytellers, environmental storytellers, not just conservation photographers. It could be any field of art, of any communication, language, mode, and medium that you will be able to at least inspire or in a way raise awareness and educate others about the environmental issues that we're facing. There are so many stories out there in the Philippines and amazing people doing amazing work, from scientists, from Prince, from Dave, from all these other Filipinos. And we need to be telling these stories to foster this growing community for conservation and biodiversity work. We just can't protect the animals. We also have to protect the people and the communities that are protecting, the flora and fauna that we have. And last but not least, it always comes offline in the field. And I think we always need to put ourselves in a position to realize that we need to transcend beyond this imagery in our social media bubbles, to possibly volunteer and take that initiative to educate others more about the stories that we tell and that we document. So I think that hopefully I get to sum up, because there's really a lot of technical aspects as well to it. But I think that's really more of the gist of what, being able to communicate environmental biodiversity conservation through our platforms. And especially as a young person, we're all socialized, we're all digitalized and connected. So I think it's really a powerful moment right now to be able to do and pursue a career in life in environmental storytelling.
Right. Thank you, Gab. And I'd like to put emphasis on how undervalued our artists and storytellers or journalists are. I feel you, and the storytelling is so impactful for me. I lived in the province, and obviously we don't hear a lot about activists and conservation and stuff back home. But it was only through photographs, through documentaries, that I learned exactly how big climate activism is and how big the challenge is for us, especially for young people. And I guess that's a biggest role of storytellers, to communicate, and exactly what you said, Gab. And to our audience also, Gab mentioned this earlier, but he had a big role in Tamaraw conservation. So we used his photos. He took photos of critically extinct tamaraws in the Philippines, and
endangered.
As said, yes, endangered tamaraws in the Philippines. And as Gab said, you were able to raise 1 million pesos, right, to help
More
the
than
people,
one.
right, to help the people who are supporting these tamaraws. And yeah, so thank you, Gab, for all your hard work and for continuing to communicate the stories of the people and the environment. Did you want to share some slides also, Gab?
Actually, no, it's okay.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. And okay, so I'll move over to Eric, who is again from the DNR, and he mentioned earlier his journey. So can you share with us, Eric, what biodiversity friendly enterprises is all about? So earlier we talked about creatives with Gab, and now we want to shift over to entrepreneurship and how enterprises, especially young entrepreneurs, can support these efforts.
Thanks, Joanna. Before I move on to PDFEs, I think I want to react first dun sa sinabi ni Gab about communicating science. I think it's very important since I graduated development in communication. I see the need talaga to popularize science, especially in conservation. Sabi nga sa grad school, a scientific journal is useless basically if you're not able to communicate it or to provide feedback sa iyong mga stakeholders. So I really commend Gab on his work and really inspiring talaga the youth through communication. So moving on to yun namang specialization or the program that I'm working on right now for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So Biodiversity Friendly Enterprise, BDFE in short. is basically providing a supplemental or alternative livelihood for our coastal communities. No? It involves the utilization of resources, leaning towards sustainability and future and further enhancement of our resources. Furthermore, this program also aims to increase yung appreciation of communities ng biodiversity through its ecosystem um, services. So really increasing the value of biodiversity and at the same time making sure that the future generation will still be able to enjoy what we are enjoying now from our natural resources. I wanted to emphasize more kasi since yung forum natin is more for the youth, no? Nabanggit ni Ma'am Christine earlier about the yung involvement ng youth sa kanilang livelihood as indigenous peoples, yung traditional knowledge, and I think that's one of the main kumbaga contribute ng youth, especially sa BDFE. No? The youth have a huge part in BDFEs mainly for its sustainability. No? We all know naman na yung commercialization na somehow affected yung lives of our communities and somehow yung mga small enterprises natin. And traditional knowledge, yun nga, I wanted to emphasize on traditional knowledge has oftentimes been neglected. No? And I think yung youth talaga, yung mga kabataan natin has the ability to really promote this indigenous knowledge, and we've seen from time to time the youth, how they can spark new ideas, no? how they can generate new ideas to add value to our natural resources. So I think those are the things that mainly the youth can contribute, especially in the implementation of alternative or supplemental livelihood to reduce yung pressure din natin sa ating mga natural resources. One of the things that we want to integrate in terms of sustainable use, nabanggit na rin ni Prince kanina about the pillars of sustainability. He mentioned about the ensuring ecological integrity of our environment. Of course, being from of course the nature of a sustainable livelihood program is para kumita din yung community. No? So that's actually one of the pillars as well of BDFEs. Another pillar that we want to promote under BDFE is on equity, on providing equal opportunity for all the sector, whether it be the women, the youth, all sector basically. We want to include them in this advocacy of BDF. And finally, if I may add dun sa pillar na binanggit ni Prince kanina, of course, all of these programs have to be bounded by the national laws and policies. No? So yung legality aspect then dapat nandito rin. So other than that, I can provide you some of the examples siguro if you wish of our BDFEs. Okay lang ba, Johanna, if I can add samples about our implementation of BDFE. So some of the so BDFE in general has become a family affair now for some of our people's organizations sa ground. So we mainly have our BDFEs or our enterprises within protected areas, and these communities they're really bonded, and yun nga, as I mentioned, it's become a family affair na for them in managing their enterprises. One of the example is in Santa Teresita, Cagayan. It's in the northern part of Luzon. Tapos their enterprise focuses on bamboo handicrafts. So initially yung mga women lang yung mga gumagawa ng bamboo handicrafts. But as time goes by, they had programs to encourage the youth as well to take part and yun, help in the enterprise. Another one yung sa Naro Fisher Folk Association. Ito naman sa Region 5 sa may Bicol region. So sila naman more on fisheries and sea cucumber ranching and crab pots. So at the very young age, nakikita na rin natin na nagiging involved na rin yung youth sa enterprise ng kanilang mga parents. So it's really beautiful. I've heard of the stories nila Gab kanina nila Dave that from a young age namulat na sila. I wasn't one of them because I've learned through experience, and I've realized, if I may use the word na ginamit ni kanina ni Sir Dave, yung purpose, the purpose, no. I think I've learned from it, from experience na, but really, it's a huge influence talaga na from their young age. The youth from the coastal communities or even terrestrial communities are being involved na, in terms of the livelihood or the lifestyle of our communities at the local level. So that's all I wanted to share, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing not just your story, but yung story ng mga communities that you also have. Do you see a lot of, because you mentioned earlier that nagiging family affair na siya, do you see a lot of young people in your work who are supporting your project?
Yeah, actually, I feel old na nga sa office namin because a lot of people or CMD staff coming in are fresh grads from university. So really, it's inspiring to see them choosing the path of conservation and development. And likewise, we encourage naman as well the youth to be involved in such activities.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll move over to Dave, all the way from Negros, tama ba? Dave? Right. And I wish we can have a fresher air like you. So Dave, I know that you work a lot with young people in your plastics campaign, right? Can you tell us more about your work with young people?
Sure. Thank you, Joanna. I'm here today to really share our story. My purpose today is to answer or maybe share some answers that we discovered when we asked the questions like, why is plastic a problem right now? Number two, how do we communicate the plastic problem to our fellow members in the community? And three, how can we redesign a sari-sari store that would reduce single-use plastic, from selling fast-moving consumer goods? These were design questions, we believe, and I'm here today to share our story. And sabi nga ni Gab, the power of the story is very important, no? So you're probably wondering where I am. I'm in Denhugan. It's an island that is dedicated to conservation south of Negros Occidental. So I speak Hiligaynon. It's a wildlife sanctuary surrounded with a marine protected area. I'm gonna say that it's very important to identify the ecosystems that we are trying to protect and why we're protecting them. And we can see that here in the Nugan Island. So I will show you pictures later. I mean, I'm sure some of you are curious. Johanna, I'm
curious.
assuming you wanna come over.
I've been wanting to join you there.
Yeah, so I'll show you pictures of the Nugan later, and then, but what I will really want to focus is how we use experiential learning and design thinking sa pag-innovate or in innovating things that we do with the communities. And my hope is that you learn from these case studies. We are also learning from it. These are prototypes. So in design thinking, we prototype things. So it is a continuous process of answering design questions and how do we address challenges of the users, or in our case, our stakeholders. Are you ready, Johanna? May ganun eh. I'm gonna need pictures for this one, so I'm gonna share my screen. And please feel free to let me know if there's a problem looking at my screen or sharing my screen. Okay ba, Johanna? Okay.
Yes, all right.
So this view, I bring you to the Nugan Island. I will try to limit this to 5 minutes. I'll set my timer. I really hope that a lot of us have the opportunity to watch the sunset every day, but of course that's not possible. But this is just sharing where I am now. It's called Dunhugan, and this is the reason why I work with the plastics problem. If you want to learn more about this island, it's on Facebook and Instagram. These are our handles. And the foundation that manages this wildlife sanctuary is the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation. It's the organization I work for. I'm the executive director, and previously I was the island manager of Dunhugan. So syempre, you can snorkel around this island, you can trek, there's a bat cave, there are lagoons, you can kayak, you can learn how to free dive. So exciting. And of course, we have programs, like Marine and Wildlife Camps is the longest running, we believe, environmental education program. Longest running na siya sa Visayas. So it's experiential, meaning we bring kids and actually now people of all ages to come and experience this island. Of course, part of the camps are cleanups, because we see how threats affect this protected area. Like aside from poaching, and activities that are unsustainable, we can see plastic, floating. And we know that this island provides us natural climate solutions. This is the first keyword that I'm sharing with you. How do we make it experiential? How do we share the story or the solutions through experience? So in Dunhugan, you can visit as a patron and go through a program that lets you connect with nature, connect with the locals, practice low impact tourism, learn about the wildlife, and experience them, like really truly immerse yourself in this experience. And of course, when we talk about climate change, we need to understand the role of these ecosystems. We often talk about mangroves and corals, but also seagrass are very, very important. This is my favorite ecosystem, by the way. I love seagrass. But our natural climate solutions face another threat with plastic pollution. I believe plastic pollution is one of the symptoms of the climate crisis as well. But of course, in the marine context, we know that plastic can be ingested by marine animals. I'm assuming a lot of us already know about this via social media. But if you want to know more about data or you want to see data about plastic pollution, you can scan this QR code on your screen, and it will provide you a lot of information, like where the plastic come from, and plastic waste end up in the ocean, how much every day is being dumped. And of course, we always hear that in 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight. This is a future that we do not accept. And the rest of my presentation is going to talk about what we're trying to do to not make this a reality that we're facing, meaning mas marami pa yung plastic kesa sa isda. So this is definitely a food security issue. Cleanups are definitely the first, one of the first events that we organize when we talk about ocean plastic. But what can we do beyond cleanups? This is a question that we always ask. Cleanups actually do not really clean up the entire world. Of course, this is just a very small sample of the waste out there, and cleaning it up now, bukas, you will see another beach of trash. So we have to think about trash as if it's like a leaking water from a faucet that's not closed. So we're mopping the floor, we're cleaning the water, we're taking the water out of the floor, but the faucet keeps leaking. So we need to address the problem at source, and that's what we believe in. However, we can still do cleanups as community awareness events, so that people are aware what trash end up in the ocean. And this means sometimes you have to integrate audits, discussions, debriefs. You need to have conversations with the community who was picking up the trash and ask them questions like, what do you think we could do to reduce this kind of trash that end up in the ocean? So let's look at waste beyond cleaning it up. And I'm presenting to you pictures of fish bolan. This is a product of design thinking. Our design question was, how can we communicate the problem of plastic and how it affects our life? So we found out through our design thinking with stakeholders, kasi multi-stakeholder siya, na klase ng approach, is that people will care about food. That's number one. The food that they're eating. And if we talk about food, how plastic affects our food, people will listen. So Fish Bolan is a mobile museum that provides information and education materials about plastic pollution. So may pagkain, may garbage juice. So you can see this team member getting water from the garbage juice dispenser. So this is an installation art piece that shows you floating trash in this dispenser, but you're getting water from it and you're drinking as a sample, parang free taste for everyone, and you invite people to drink from it. Of course, people are gonna say, no, I'm not gonna drink from that. That's full of trash. And then you start a conversation, So this is also experiential learning because you're engaging all of the senses, sometimes you even have to taste it or smell it, see it, hear it. There's music with this fishbowl and it's very colorful. It goes on public spaces and talk about plastic pollution this way. So this is an alternative to your traditional, IEC lecture when we do solid waste management advocacy. Okay, I need to wrap up. I hope I've been helpful so far. So to reduce waste at source, we also dug into what we can use as a catchphrase for zero waste because naintindihan namin na yung zero waste can be alienating and circular economy as well. So these principles of nothing being wasted or hindi nagsasayang is encapsulated by this beautiful local phrase that's wala usik. And it was such a breakthrough for me and my friends, Angel and Kath, when we were promoting zero waste lifestyle in our communities. We needed a word that they can relate to. So wala usik means walang sayang in Tagalog, or nothing is wasted, or walay usik in Bisaya. And we have used this to mainstream, ideas like refilling, to reduce plastic from these products. And then we also looked into history and heritage. Paano ba natin binibenta yung mga produkto before sa sari-sari store? If you look at old photos, you can see that little person over there with a bowl, bumili ata yan ng arroz caldo. So you see they're bringing containers, and that was the tradition already. I mean, the practice already. If you buy cooking oil, you bring an empty bottle to the store and refill it. So our question was, can we redesign the modern sari-sari store to be micro-refilleries? And this was our journey, and we call these wala usik sari-sari stores. 7 minutes na ako. I'll just show you some pictures of these stores. We prototype them. We're still learning about them. What are the challenges? What are the things that need to happen in terms of supply chain responsibilities? And collaborating, and further on expanding it to other industries like food and beverage, for deliveries, for other cafes and even carinderias. How can we reduce or promote circular economy? How can we reduce waste and promote circular economy with the MSME sector? So these are just few of the innovations that we are looking at. So refilleries, refilling models, so these are our menu of innovations that we found from the community. Shared reuse systems, native packaging, bioplastics is debatable, but it's there. Redesigning formats and shapes like solid, personal care products, rental models, repair models, and even non-traditional business models. In the end, I want to share with you this opportunity. If you have ideas to replicate what I've just shared, or if you have an idea to make business circular, you can scan the QR code on the screen and join the Wala Usik Challenge, a circular economy hackathon. So I hope I wasn't boring you from my presentation. But really, I just wanted to share the
Not at
visuals
all.
because visuals are very important. I wanted to let you see that we also designed this from scratch. And, we are also young people. In fact, everyone in the team is youth, so we need, and sometimes our stakeholders are LGU officials, or, teachers who have been in Dep Ed for a long time. So sometimes we give them the fresh ideas, we give them innovations, like especially that our attention span is short. That being said, for my presentation, I hope that I got your attention. But we need to be more sensory. Johanna, thank you for the time, and I will pause now kasi kung hindi, I keep going.
Thank you, Dave. Well, una sa lahat, ang dami kong gustong i-process. Kasi I'm sure lahat kami nadighani. First photo mo pa lang. And we were all saying, wow, we really want to go there. May surf ba dyan, Dave? Or wala?
Meron, pero hindi ka pwedeng mag-surf though kasi it's too shallow. Independence is too shallow, tapos coral reef siya di ba? So
I see.
Sa Sipalay, meron.
So, bibisita na ako dyan. But thank you again, Dave. There are so many things to unpack in your presentation. First of all, the power of storytelling once again, showcasing us how important photography is, how important journalism and communication is to pushing forward your advocacy. And second, very interesting, the old photo that you showed us of people bringing containers, diba? Kung na-experience pa rin to, kung nasan man kayo ngayon, yung bibili ka ng taho sa labas, tapos magdadala ka ng sarili mong baso. Yung hindi plastic yung ibibigay sa ni Manong. So ginagawa ko pa rin siya ngayon. Maswerte ako na may taho na dumadaan where I am. Yeah, so thanks again, Dave, and thank you for emphasizing how important it is to engage young people and sharing na most of the people in your team are young. So I'll turn it over to Abby for the next half of this conversation. And for the audience, feel free to keep typing in your questions. Our panelists are also nakaantabay sila sa Q&A and they're answering some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. So, mapangjan agaw san si kayo amin. So, I'm a bit belated in giving my greetings, but I hope everybody's receiving it in a good place. So I think Typhoon Dante just is leaving the country, I think, just leaving. So I hope we are all safe and sound while we are having this webinar. So before I turn to the next set of panelists, I'd just like to also share my appreciation and reaction to the speakers before us. So I appreciate that, like, for example, Prince mentioned he highlighted the importance of considering the life cycle of a product. So I think Dave also mentioned this regarding plastic. So usually we don't, like, when we buy something, we just use it and then maybe throw it away, but we don't consider how it impacts the environment, from the extraction of resources to the production, to the distribution, then to where we throw it away. And I also appreciate Gab for sharing, and Dave also mentioned this earlier, Gab for sharing his advocacy for sharing stories through photos, because it really brings us these issues closer to our senses, and it really shows us it's important for us to cultivate biodiversity values, to conserve biodiversity. Not only, well, our focus right now is youth, but not only youth, but at any age. So yeah, and I'd also like to pick up on what Dave said earlier, that yes, we are humans are part of nature, and usually we always hear humans and nature, culture and nature as dichotomous or opposite from each other, but in fact we are part of nature, and we have to contribute to sustaining the cycle. So one of the examples of how culture can help in environmental protection are actually indigenous peoples. So maybe we can go to our next speaker. So we have Miss Christine from the Kulahi Band of the Talandig. So from kanina pinag-usapan natin mga coastal areas or so from baliktad tayo, from reef to ridge naman. So let's go to the mountains of Mount Kalatungan, which is very dear also for me because it's very close to Benguet, to the climate of Benguet, with all the horses and potatoes and the carrots. So Miss Christine, gusto naming makarinig from galing sa'yo kung ano yung ginagawa ng pamayanan ng mga talaandig sa inyo sa pag-protect ng ating pag-protect ng inyong ancestral domain or yung inyong indigenous community conserved area. So, maaari ba kaming makarinig sa inyo?
Yes po, Miss Abby. Hello po. Sino bang mag-operate ng screen?
Ayan na po, nag-share na ho.
Okay po.
Okay, sige ho. You can proceed.
Bago ako magsisimula, nais ko munang magpapasalamat kay Sir Timothy Salomon na naging dahilan kung bakit naimbita ako dito na maging panelist. So, ibabahagi ko lang sa inyo yung conservation efforts ng Portalin Talaandig Tribal Association. So, next slide please. So, ang Portalin Talaandig Tribal Association ay makikita sa Barangay Portalin, Pangantukan, Bukidnon. Yung tribal chieftain namin ay yung aking ama, Dato Johnny Bagosayana Gina. So, ang organization namin ay SEC-registered at as of now, meron kaming 165 household members. Okay, next slide please. So ito yung aming tribal center, livelihood center na rin yung kabila. So dito lahat nagaganap yung mga activities ng mga katutubong talaandig. Okay, next slide please. So ito yung aming mga elders na talagang walang humpay yung pakikibaka para sa kalikasan, yung para sa kultura at yung kalikasan na nga. So nandyan yung mga Council of Elders namin, yung mga bahi at yung mga dato balaghusay. Okay, next slide please. So ngayong umaga ay ibabahagi ko sa inyo yung outline lang na FAST, no, FAST, para maging gabay sa ating pagbabahagian ngayong umaga. Okay, next slide please. So unang-una, F, no, foundation. Isa sa mga pinagbabasihan ng mga tribong talaandig, yung culture plus nature plus governance. Kasi yun yung indigenous perspective na kung saan, sabi ko nga kanina, yung culture and nature are inseparable. So ngayon, tatalakay natin kung ano ba, bakit culture plus nature equals governance. So next slide please. So dito, culture, dyan yung mga customary laws, no, ng mga katutubo, yung mga rituals, nandyan din yung traditional knowledge. So halimbawa, ipagpalagay natin na wala na si nature, no? So ang mangyayari niyan, mawawala na rin yung kultura ng mga katutubo. Kasi nga, para sa mga katutubo, ang nature, yun yung pharmacy, yung church, yung school, at yung market. So lahat-lahat ng way of life ng mga katutubo nakaugat sa kalikasan. Kaya nga mahirap siya na i-separate mo ang isang katutubo doon sa kalikasan. Kung titingnan natin sa Pilipinas, lahat ng mga biodiversity na buhay pa, nandoon buhay na buhay rin yung kultura. Kaya nga isa sa mga foundation ng siguro lahat ng katutubo, no? Yung nature talaga. So hindi bago sa kanila yung conservation efforts kasi nga bahagi na ito ng kanilang buhay. Okay, next slide please. So ito ay mga halimbawa, no, ng ritual, no? Ito yung pamamaraan namin para makokonekta doon sa kalikasan kasi naniniwala ang mga katutubo na may mga spirits na tagabantay, no? Halimbawa, para sa pagpapasalamat sa tubig, no, meron kaming layanon ritual at yung ritual din para sa pagpapasalamat sa gift ng forest, meron din kaming sinibagan ritual. So yan ay every year ginagawa ng mga katutubong talaandig. So para sa amin, parang hindi pwede mo na basta-basta na lang na hahayaan yung nature na masira kasi nga bahagi siya ng kultura. For example, kung wala na yung tubig, yung halimbawa yung Bagikikan Falls, saan na kami magri-ritual, no? So, parang mahirap na i-separate mo yung nature doon sa kultura ng mga katutubo. So, yan ay isa sa mga pamamaraan din ng traditional knowledge na kung saan sa bawat ritual namin, dinadala namin yung mga kabataan kasi nga sila yung tagasunod doon sa efforts ng aming mga elders. Okay, next slide please. So, action naman tayo, no? So, tapos na yung foundation. Ngayon, action, paano natin masusustain yung ganoon na foundation? So, meron kaming Kulahi Tribal Youth Organization. So, ito yung Kulahi Band. Meron din kaming Sinlakapi Social Enterprise para ito ay minamanage ng mga youth at ng mga women's. At yung Bantay Lasang Volunteers na kung saan ito ay mga out of school youth, yung mga kadalasan o mga mostly participants dito. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so proceed tayo sa pangantukan, kulahi pangantukan performing arts. Kami naniniwala kami na merong mga innate talent yung mga katutubo. So, halimbawa, mga katutubo mahilig silang mag-compose ng mga songs. So, ang ginagawa namin ay nagre-research kami doon sa mga indigenous knowledge system and practices ng aming mga ninuno. Piniperform namin siya through education information campaign. At yun na nga, ini-interpret namin siya through songs and dance. Kasi nakita namin na mas effective yung pagpapalaganap ng aming kultura kung parang na-entertain yung aming mga participants. So ito yung isa sa mga pamamaraan ng mga katutubong talaandig para mas maipalabas, no? Yung encouragement sa mga kabataan, yung pananatili ng kagubatan, yung kalikasan. Kasi nga, through songs, pinapalabas namin kung ano yung aming mga hinanaing, no? So kulahi ibig sabihin sigaw, no? Kulahi is a talaandig term which means shout, no? So diyan lahat ng sigaw ng mga katutubong kabataan pinaparaan namin sa aming mga cultural presentation. So ito ay acknowledged ng aming municipality at naka-perform na rin sa Davao, sa Cagayan de Oro yung aming banda. Okay, next slide please. So meron din kaming cultural and organizational training. So bawat kabataan doon sa aming ancestral domain, no, kasi meron kaming 6 na indigenous peoples organization. So kibali yung PTTA, yun yung umbrella ng lahat ng organization. So meron kaming ginagawang organizational training, no? Kasi nga isa sa mga pinaka-challenge ngayon kung paano maipabalik yung mga kabataan sa talagang kinagisnan or yung traditional knowledge kumbaga. No, kasi napakaraming pwedeng mangyari yung mga challenges nga, yung halimbawa na lang makakalimutan na yung pagsayaw, makakalimutan na yung mga ginagawang ritual kasi mas na-focus doon sa mga TikTok, kahit saan-saan pa na mga pwedeng ma-focus, no? So dito sa mga training na ito, nagiging inspiration ang mga kabataan, no? Kasi nga isa sa mga speakers namin dito, yung mga Council of Elders namin, no? Na pinapabalik yung ano ba yung pinaka-role bilang isang kabataang katutubo. Okay, so next slide please. So ito ay isa din sa mga halimbawa, no? So merong mga training, no, na kung saan binabalik, no, parang nire-refresh yung mga role ng mga kabataan para sa kalikasan. Kasi nga naniniwala kami na kami yung tagasunod ng aming mga katutubo, ng mga katutubong mga elders namin. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so ito yung isa sa mga empowerment ng mga kabataan kasi nga mahirap na halimbawa hahayaan mo na lang yung mga katutubo na kahit ano-ano na lang ang ginagawa. So dito pinapakita namin yan yung mga tribal craftsmanship, no? Yung ito ay isa sa mga halimbawa nila, gumagawa sila ng beads bilang bahagi ng kanilang finances na mga pangangailangan. Meron ding mga reforestation activities na mga ginagawa, no? So ito ay sariling initiative ng Puerto Lintalandig Tribal Association para mas makita yung ano pang kayang gawin ng mga katutubong kabataan. Okay, next slide please. So meron din kaming sinlakapi na kung saan yung mga kabataan din ang talagang tumutulong para mas masustain nga yung sinasabi namin kanina na culture for nature. Kasi nga yung bawat ritual talagang napakaraming pwedeng kailangan, no? Lalong-lalo na sa finances. Okay, next slide please. Okay, 3 minutes na lang. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so ito yung mga bantay lasang volunteers. So ito yung mga kabataan, no? They do forest patrol once a month, no? At ito ay part ng mga team ay ang mga out of school youth na kung saan binibigyan din namin sila ng pagkakataon na maipakita yung kanilang kakayahan sa pag-monitor ng aming kalikasan. So, next slide please. Okay, so ito yung mga kanilang ginagawa, no, ng conservation efforts na pumupunta sila sa kalikasan para mag-check kung kumusta na ba ang aming ancestral domain. So tuloy-tuloy na lang yung slide, please. So dito ipinapakita namin na marami ang pwedeng gawin ng mga katutubo, no? Kasi nga sila yung mga tagasunod ng aming efforts ng aming mga ninuno. Okay, next slide pa. Okay, dito tayo sa sustainability. Paano natin masusustain yung culture and nature na foundation? So dito, kailangan natin ng good system. So ginagawa ng PTTA, forest protection, no, based sa aming mga project, forest protection ay 40% at yung livelihood program ay 60%. No? So ginagawa namin ito kasi nga yung forest protection, natural na yan, nandyan na yan, kailangan na lang i-maintain. Pero yung livelihood program, halimbawa, pag gutom si katutubo, kailangan natin na ma-feed yung pangangailangan niya. Kasi malaking possibility na halimbawa, pag gutom siya, pupunta siya sa halimbawa kalikasan at mamumutol ng puno. No? Isa yun sa mga halimbawa. No? Kaya nga 60% yung livelihood program namin. Okay, next slide please. So iyan ay isa sa mga halimbawa ng aming view deck. No? Ito ay isang ecotourism ng mga katutubong talaandig na kung saan based dyan merong mga ang income na kinakuha dyan ay doon napapunta sa mga rituals na kinakailangan ng mga activity ng mga indigenous peoples. Okay, next slide please. Okay, meron din kaming bonsai garden, yung heritage sites namin. So iyan ay isa din sa mga ecotourism ng aming community. Next slide, please. Okay, and then nasa Mount Kilakiron, isa ding heritage sites. Next slide, please. At iyan ay isang PTTA freshwater pool. So lahat ng mga income na nakukuha dyan ay napupunta doon sa mga needs namin, lalong-lalo na sa pagpapalakas ng aming indigenous knowledge system and practices, yung traditional knowledge. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so ngayon technical, so napakarami, no, kailangan ng mga linkages para mas mapalakas pa yung aming mga naisagawang activities. Okay, next slide please. Next slide, please. Okay, so yung K lessons is work with your passion. Gagamitin nyo yung mga skills, talents, and principles nyo bilang mga kabataan. No? Start with a positive mind kasi meron tayong tinatawag na law of attraction. And lastly, be a servant leader. Kasi naniniwala ako, no? Ayon kay John Maxwell, true leadership must be for the benefit of the followers, not to enrich the leader. So yan lang po at maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat din, Ate Christine, sa inyong pagbabahagi. Ayan. So, we invite those who are with us in the Zoom. You can also type your questions in the Q&A and we will see kung paano sasagutin. Pwedeng live or maybe pwedeng sagutin din ng ating panelists. Ayan. So, related din yung sinabi ni Ate Christine dun sa sinabi ni Eric earlier, right, na important talaga yung role ng youth para i-interface yung, for example, yung pag-commercialize and then yung traditional knowledge na binahagi din ni ng experience ng mga talaandig from sa sharing ni Ate Christine. So now we heard from we had something on photography. So thank you po, Miss Christine. So we had something on photography, on enterprises, on plastics, on music and heritage. And now let's turn on to fashion, which is, I think, an interest of many youth, especially na mahilig tayo sa ukay-ukay dito sa Pilipinas. So we call on again Prince. So the question we have for you is twofold, to incorporate also the questions from the Q&A. So I know you answered it already, but for the sake of those joining us live on Facebook, first, how is circular fashion being received by the general public here in the Philippines? And second, what are the ways through which youth can participate in climate advocacy through fashion?
All
So
right,
it's
thank you.
just yes. Thank you, Prince. Yeah.
So wow, before I begin, I'm just really honored and inspired to hear a lot from our other panelists. They're very inspiring and purpose driven. And to go back to your question, wait. Okay, so basically, what I mentioned earlier was about the sustainable fashion, how unsustainable our practices as consumers and producers are. And I think it's not a question of can we make sustainable development a part of fashion, but it is a matter of the industry must champion sustainable development. And when we talk about sustainable fashion, again, as mentioned earlier, it involves the three P's, but what we are also championing in Wear Forward or my fashion tech startup is also circular fashion. So basically, it's a design wherein we are designing clothes for recycling or for reuse, and we are also making it in a part of the circular economy model that's regenerative and restorative, meaning that from make, use, and reuse circular linear economy model, we are trying to make it circular in a way that we create materials and products with their next use in mind. And we eliminate fashion waste, and we restore valuable clothes, accessories, and other textiles, thereby shifting to a restorative and regenerative supply chain that's starting from the very beginning of the supply chain and goes to the consumers aspects as well. And unfortunately, in the Philippines, we don't have that much data on how we perceive sustainability or circularity or even the fashion pollution and or waste that we have. And it's really a challenge to look for and acquire some statistics about our country's fashion footprint, for instance, because we don't have any available or published research just yet. But that's where the Filipino youth and fashion community should come in. So for instance, to understand our fashion ecosystem and to guide us in creating policies and systems which are geared towards sustainable and circular development of our Philippine fashion industry, one of the goals of Wear Forward or my fashion tech startup is to conduct research to better understand everything. So according to a mini research we conducted in 2019 on the fashion purchase, consumption, disposal, and behavior of Filipinos in Metro Manila, around 95% of the respondents know what sustainability is, while over 77% practice sustainability in fashion. Moreover, we found out that nearly 78% of those who aren't aware of or aware about sustainability yet are interested to learn about sustainability or circularity in fashion. And it doesn't represent the whole Filipino youth or the whole Philippines, but in the future, we want to conduct more research about our consumption and production. But nevertheless, sustainability has really become a major topic worldwide in recent years. And among the trends that we are seeing today are that younger consumers are more concerned about their environmental and socio-economic impacts concerning fashion, and that the consumers demand transparency and accountability from fashion companies, and that the market demands more sustainably made materials and products. And there is a greater role for partnerships between producers and consumers at the same time, with the youth being a large part of that consumers. So in the Philippines, I have observed that there has been an increasing interest in sustainable fashion among our designers, manufacturers, artisans, social entrepreneurs, consumers, and government agencies. Like, of course, we have the Philippine Textile Research Institute, the Department of Trade and Industry, and also our fashion schools have recently included dedicated classes and topics on sustainable fashion to their fashion programs curriculum. So I know iAcademy, SOFA Design Institute, and what else? IceFad. They incorporated these changes in their program just this year. And the fashion programs of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, De La Salle College of St. Benil, the other schools are also very much involved in the sustainable fashion dialogue. So it's really nice to have our academe take part in our advocacy in sustainable and circular fashion, which are also related to our environmental and climate advocacies. And on top of that, I've also observed a growing community of online Filipino fashion, upcycling, and zero waste lifestyles. So I'm sure a lot of you are member of those Facebook groups. So to our listeners, we are also have a Facebook group which in you can participate to further your climate and environmental advocacies. So one of the initiatives we have is the Circular Fashion Philippines and Circular Fashion Global Communities. So basically they are purpose-driven online communities that is addressing the environmental and socio-economic impacts of fashion and basically revolutionizing together to achieve a sustainable and circular fashion industry. So this is open to all Filipinos, and for our global community, it's open to the rest of the world. And basically, we use this platform to share and be updated about fashion news, researches, resources, consumer habits, and even the best practices that we have in the fashion industry. And here we can discuss challenges, ideas, strategies, and developments in the industry with respect to or with the perspectives of both the consumers and the producers. So basically, in this community, we can learn from each other, we can meet fashion accountability partners, and we can promote sustainable and circular fashion products, especially those that are Filipino made, as well as fashion or related businesses, organizations, and other initiatives focused on sustainability, circular economy, sharing economy, or other collaborative consumption. And here, it's also good to note that we can swap, rent out, or donate our textile waste. So basically those pre-loved and upcycled clothes that we have at home that we don't use or need anymore, so we can share them to our community. And in Wear Forward as well, we have this Donate Your Textile Waste initiative wherein we collect the textile wastes or clothes, accessories, and other textiles from households, from companies, schools, designers, and other organizations as well. And here we can also source fashion service providers. So basically, we have collaborators or members in the community that are weavers, artisans, or suppliers, etc. So we can source and help each other with our own endeavors, and we can network with everyone and collaborate on organizing relevant events such as like this one and projects. And so I would like to remind our listeners or our attendees or the rest who are watching us on Facebook right now that we have environmental and social economic responsibilities. And as consumers, we first need to invest knowledge, know the extent of the problem so that we can be part of the solution. And as we say also in Fashion Revolution, be curious, find out, and do something. So as youth, we can address our own behavior, and we don't only need to change fashion, but actually we need to change our mindsets towards how we view things, towards how we take care and conserve the resources that we have. And one way to be a part of the change is by making our own or personal sustainable wardrobe. So today, the average lifespan of garment is just 3 years. And if we could only produce more good quality clothes, and I know we can, and we should, and then we wear them more than 50 times instead of just 5 times, then we can actually reduce our personal carbon emissions by up to more than 400%. So imagine that and take that into consideration when you are buying your clothes, and think of buying clothes that you can actually wear more than 50 times, and that can already have a great impact in our environment. And so here are also some of the tips that I have for our attendees, our listeners out there, on how we can build our own sustainable wardrobe. So first, it's very simple. Buy less clothing, buy only what you need, and remember to choose quality over quantity. And second, part of being a conscious, a mindful, and a sustainable consumer, or a sustainable consumer youths, is that before we purchase a new clothing item, we have to do our research and ask the manufacturers or the brands we follow if they followed a certain sustainable criteria in making and handling their products. And also, thirdly, I think it's very good time to explore vintage, second-hand, or hand-me-down clothes, or buying or making our own upcycled clothes. So for my personal experience, I haven't bought new clothes for the past 6 years. And I hope you can also do that. You can just consume everything that you have in your closet right now and consume them effectively, efficiently. And as you may already know, upcycling actually is very helpful for the environment. It lowers production cost, it saves natural resources, and it allows for more creativity. And fourthly, let's take care of our clothes by following the garment care and laundry instructions. So by storing them properly and by repairing them when needed, so that can really go a long way in extending the life cycle or lifespan of our clothing. And fifth, don't throw away our clothes. Again, we can swap our clothes with others, or we can donate them to organizations, as what I have already answered to Miss Gloria's question. And also sixth is we keep in mind that as long as we keep our clothes in use for as long as we can, and we minimize, by then we can minimize our own fashion footprint. Every additional year we wear our clothes, and again, let's wear them more than 50 times. And maybe just to end, I just want to say that let's avoid making big and drastic changes, because sustainable and circular fashion is a lifestyle. It's not just about the clothes. It's not just about the people who make our clothes. It's not just about how we purchase them and consume them, but it's a lifestyle. So let's start with habits that are easier for us to change and do. And then I believe that with these small actions that we do, it can already like lead to big changes, and our everyday collective actions can lead to crucial differences. So I always remember that whatever we wear or whatever we subscribe to is an expression of who we are as a person. It also shows the values that we have. If we are environmentalists, if we are climate advocates, then let's show that to the clothes that we wear. And most importantly, let's dress not to impress other people, but also, and more importantly again, let's dress to express the statements and the values that we have.
All right. Thank you, Prince, for giving a very comprehensive picture of circular fashion in the Philippines and for giving very practical tips for us to be conscious consumers and practice this lifestyle, as you have mentioned it. So now from fashion, we'll turn into sustainable transport. So let's hear from Miko. So the questions we have for you are, first, considering our current circumstances right now, has the push for sustainable transport been received by the government? How has the government in general public received the push for sustainable transport? And second, how can we make transport sustainable, and what can the younger generation do to support this movement?
All right. Thanks, Abby. Ang mahirap din na since I'm the last person to talk. So, I already got mind blown with all those, very insightful presentations by my fellow panelists. But on to that question, perhaps if you will indulge me, I know it's already past 12, but if you'll indulge me, I'll just try impart a few things, a bit more statistics, unfortunately. But uh, to start, close to 40% of the total national energy consumption of our country is basically comes from from the transport sector rather. 80% of which comes from road transport. And as a matter of fact, even more worryingly, is that road transport is also one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So, as mentioned earlier, my realization moment was a few years back when I saw I saw different transport system. And I guess for a lot of us here in the country, they also had a similar realization, and that was the time during ECQ. When all transportation stopped, it just so happened that when you look outside, oh, it's actually you can imagine that the skies could be clearer than what you got used to. And because that's already, that was a default for us, that was something we already took for granted. And in relation to that, actually, is with and this has been mentioned already by my co-panelists, like in terms of the discussion on the on the importance of storytelling, as Gab mentioned, and and scientific communication. With Dave mentioning about how the need to start the discussion for Prince, specifically on the behavior change. I think this is something I guess that I would also relate to my co-panelists here, is that we in this in our respective efforts towards sustainability. I think right now the bigger challenge for us is a lot of the work that we're doing is more on on raising awareness, and yeah, yes, that is very important, because that's the first step for us to know that, to realize that there's something better, that something needs to be done. And the next is, once people are aware, education has to come next. uh, you deep dive into into the respective issues, the respective concerns. But I think at the end of it all, I think what we also wanted to do is more on behavior change, and basically it's more of how do we make it easy for everyone to do the right behavior. So in relation to that, I go back to transportation. So as mentioned earlier, that the shift towards sustainable transport has been felt at that time when we were right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, the biggest global crisis in our lifetime so far. But with the ensuing pandemic and the lockdowns, it has basically affected everyone, but most especially those who do not have the means to go from point A to point B. And that is regardless if you're a frontliner or otherwise, although there have been steps made along the way, but basically everyone did suffer as a result of that. And hence, with the realization that there's a need to improve transport options, especially during that critical period of time, both national and local governments actually did take some steps. And this is through also the initiatives of various advocacy groups, such as those that I mentioned earlier, in ensuring that mobility would still be possible amidst our measures against COVID-19. So with that, as an example, you have the push for bicycle lanes. And with the bicycle lanes that have been put up, I think the OTR and the other related agencies are on track to being able to complete the 500-kilometer bike lane network for Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, and Metro Davao. Um, that also led to an increase in bikes on the road, and also not just bikes, but also bike commuters. And in fact, bicycle imports here in the country as of last year actually surged to more than 100% as a result of that. And I guess another thing is to note is, in a survey conducted earlier this year by SWS, close to 9 out of 10 Filipinos did actually say that bikes, pedestrians, and public transport should be actually be prioritized on the road over private vehicles. However, here's the thing: given the realities on the ground, there's still much more to be done, and basically for each of us who are making these decisions on how to commute, on how to travel from point A to point B, even if we do want if we want to go for active transport, for sustainable transport, wanting to do something does not always translate to acting on it. And I guess I'll be putting on my behavioral science hat here, because I think this is one of the things that we need to consider, that for us, there's such a thing called the intention action gap, wherein even if even if you want to do something, it doesn't necessarily that you'll also do it, because there are a lot of other factors at play. Say for example, for in the case of uh, let's say for example, with regard to the availability of transport for in your case, like if you have a private car, since it's already there in your garage, you'll try to do that, even if you know that you are actually contributing to higher greenhouse gas emissions just by using your private car. Another is, there are a number of what do you call it, as friction costs, where in such a way, like say for example, if you want, say for example, you want to bike going to work, although if you already bought your bike, you still have a number of things to consider, like how safe actually is it for me to go from my home to my place of destination safely, more conveniently. And if you think of, okay, are the will I be safe on my way to work using that? Perhaps maybe not, or maybe it's gonna be more hectic or more of a hassle for me. Then at the end of the day, you won't be what do you call it? You wouldn't in the end you won't be using your bicycle. So I think it is important basically for us to make this point, which is it is really important for us to make it easy for everyone, certainly especially for transportation. It is really important to make it easy for everyone to shift their behaviors towards sustainable transport, especially that this is something that we are regularly doing on a daily basis. Initially, this can be done by, as mentioned, you can reduce barriers that deter people to use sustainable transport. Another is to also improve the system to make it as their default choice of going from point A to point B. Again, as mentioned, there have been milestones made by the government, and also in collaboration with the private sector and civil society. But still, much has yet to be done. This is a start of what we're doing, and we're happy to be working with our partners in government, private sector, and civil society. But again, the question remains is, as for, I guess this goes for all of us here, is how do we ensure that these efforts will actually be sustained in the long run? And I would say this is where the youth has a big role to play. So if I may continue with this, just a few things with regard to making sustainable transport actually sustainable. Three things come in mind. So first thing is, we really need to make the right policies that will send a clear signal that sustainable transport is the way forward. And this has been mentioned already by Eric earlier. Really need to have that framework. Once you have these policies, especially if this translates into laws or other ordinances, these are actually these are hard to it's hard to reverse. It takes a similar effort to take away these policies. So it's really important, and it's also it's a signal not to just the government in all levels, but also to the private sector who are looking into investing, say for example, in green transportation, or even for the general public. Say for example, if you have these policies that say that will protect their rights and welfare on the road, and of course that a lot of people will be emboldened now to take this different this sustainable transport, right? Another is there's a need actually to leverage on the ongoing momentums, and this can be done by continue to support the needs which are advocated by early adopters, so that the programs will benefit a bigger segment of the population. As you may know, even before COVID, there are already cyclists, or we call them cyclists, as if they are a different segment of the population. But we could also look at them as, there are commuters, bike commuters, right? But again, since they are at the forefront of this challenge, of this fight towards having a more sustainable transport system here in the country, there is a need for us to also support these efforts, because at the end of the day, once they will be able to set this, they will be able to push through with these activities. Government actually, if you notice, government actually listens, and government also collaborates with different sectors. And if I may mention here, the work done by Move as One Coalition. This is a coalition of many different organizations, civil society groups, pushing for a better transport system. I think this is something that we just need to help support on in the long run, to ensure that the shift towards sustainable transportation will continue beyond the pandemic, and to make it something more of a habit, more of a default for us, that we can take more active forms of transport as an option, as a more viable option. And finally, there's a need actually to normalize these efforts as a sustained phenomena. And again, there's a need for us to harness the social proof and social norms, actually, to encourage the rest of the public to adopt these sustainable mobility practices. But finally, for the youth, can the youth actually be able to support this movement? Two ways come in mind. So first, demand more, demand better. The shift did not happen just because of the pandemic. It took collective action from those within and outside the system to make it happen. I've been mentioning about civil society groups here, but I have to give a shout out as well to the young men and women who are working with us in the various government agencies, specifically within the OTR, who are very enthusiastic about making a change for a better transport system. And in this case, you have the bike lanes, the walkways, and the like. But it doesn't stop there. We need to keep the momentum going to expand the program and make it more accessible to everyone. Another is to make the environment friendly option as the default, as in the case of transport. Uh, Make it our default option to walk, to bike, or to commute our way to our destination. And I guess finally, yeah, since I have 30 seconds already, uh, my last point here is basically we just need to cultivate the right mindset and the right behaviors among the youth. It is important for us basically to educate, to make them aware, and to educate them, not just about the need to care for the environment, but also, and more importantly, how they would be able to include it into their daily lives. As mentioned nga by Kristen Joy, yun nga, bahagi ng buhay. It's how do we normalize it and make it a habit. As you know, we make so many decisions in a day. There's what you call the cognitive bandwidth. You can only process so much, and the best way for us to be able to make a high impact to climate action is by taking these small steps as our default, be it in how we choose to commute, on how we choose to consume different items, even to what we wear. And again, I guess, yeah, from my end, I like to say, like from us in the UNDP, we continue working with the partners in government and other sectors in making this, in making sustainable transport easy for everyone, especially for the youth, to choose the environmentally friendlier decisions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that also comprehensive presentation and for sharing concrete steps for how youth can engage in this movement. So we've heard a lot of call to action from all our previous speakers. So I guess, and to comment also on to what has been previously mentioned, I guess I just also want to share this question up to everyone who is here with us today, on how we as a society can support youth, or encourage enabling conditions for youth to become more active in and to support youth actions on biodiversity and addressing climate change. So now I think I'm sorry I wasn't able to flag earlier that we've already been are past 12 and we might be extending until maybe 12:30 or a little more. So now I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. I think I have to call back in Jo and Char. So for our
Thanks,
Q&A.
Abby.
Yes, all right.
Thanks, Abby. Yes, so the breadth of discussions is really quite impressive. Thank you so much again to all of our panelists. Grabe, the insights mined from just the panel discussion, it's so broad. So I think we will give a bit more time to Jonathan, the Regional Development Coordinator of United Nations Environment Program in Bangkok, so that he can summarize the key insights. But before that, I think we will open the floor for maybe one or two questions for the whole panel to answer. Joe, is there any question that surfaced, like a very interesting question that surfaced during the whole process? And then we'll let the panelists maybe answer, maybe give them a minute to answer the questions. There's one very interesting question here about I think they were answered already by our panelists in the Q&A.
Most of the questions have been...
Yeah, most of them have been answered.
Sobrang rich yung sharing. Hindi ko alam kung may masisiksik ka pa ng questions.
Right. So what we'll do is, since we are also pressed for time and we really appreciate that everyone stayed with us, even though we've already extended for half an hour. Thank you so much. We've taken note of your questions. We will include them in the newsletter that we will be sending out. So I think without further ado, we will be cutting our panel discussion short now, and we will be turning over the floor to the Regional Development Coordinator of the United Nations Environment Program in Bangkok, Mr. Jonathan Gilman, for his reaction to the panel discussion that transpired. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much to you all, and thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and it's been great to hear the stories from the panelists over the last hour. This is one of a number of events, thousands in fact, around the world today and tomorrow, involving millions of people to try and increase the political pressure and action for the protection and restoration of ecosystems. So I just wanted to highlight some of the key points that jumped out at me. The first one was from Annalisa Tay, the Undersecretary, where she highlighted the importance of youth as the future stewards of the planet. And I know from my own teenage children, they're very passionate about the environment. Although when I offer to go to school to speak to their classmates about it, they always say, please, Dad, don't. Moving on, Gab, it was really interesting to hear his story about nature photography. And I think one of the important things about nature photography is that to raise awareness, because I think it's critical to make change. We need to inspire people to engage politically, and for that they need to, I think, see the results of impacts on the environment. And we've seen that as well in the region as air pollution and haze became an issue in recent years. When people see that impact in their day-to-day lives, they take political action and put pressure on governments for change. Dave, as well, highlighted, I think, the very important issue of the spiritual, cultural, and aesthetic value of nature. And this is also important just for our mental health, I think, for all of us. And this issue, though, is often not factored into decision-making when we look at how we're going to use a piece of land or develop a piece of land. We need to take into account these factors, which are perhaps difficult to measure. And I think this highlights the importance of when we develop land, we need to engage with communities who live on that land to make sure we understand these cultural and spiritual issues for them. On the issue of plastics, also highlighted by Dave, I just wanted to note as well that one of the most exciting pieces of work I think that UNEP is doing now is we're bringing together all the countries in the world to try and negotiate a global treaty on marine litter pollution, to try and get governments to commit to concrete action and measurable action beyond what they're already doing. So that's an ongoing process to address, trying to address that issue. Prince Ventura highlighted the private sector work and I think the critical point that it's possible to be sustainable but also profitable at the same time. And that's a critical message that we need to convey to the private sector, and as we engage with them to try and ensure that they reduce their environmental footprints. And we won't achieve the SDGs without having a positive and active engagement from the private sector. Eric from DNR, on a related subject, talked about biodiversity-friendly enterprises, building on indigenous knowledge, and again, critical, particularly because across ASEAN, the majority of people work in these small enterprises. So by taking action to scale up engagement with small enterprises, making them more sustainable, it can have a significant positive impact for nature and jobs. Christine Joy, thank you for representing the tribal groups. And it was good and interesting to highlight the fact that the importance of the culture and nature bond, which is increasingly becoming separated in the modern world, but we can learn from indigenous practices and apply them more broadly. And lastly, we just heard from Miko on sustainable transport. So let me end by emphasizing that restoring the ecosystems in Philippines and globally is in fact a massive project that will need to address and repair billions of hectares of land in order that people have access to food and clean water and jobs. And it means bringing back plants and animals from the brink of extinction, but it also means that we all need to show and do many small acts of kindness, such as planting a tree, rewilding gardens, cleaning up trash, and also asking others to do the same. So thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Jonathan, for so succinctly summarizing the panel discussions. We really appreciated that, and I think everyone here, everyone who has stayed with us until the end, all 270 of us, really was able to take away something from the very fruitful conversations that we've had with our youth panelists. Now, we will be moving on to the last part of our program to represent the Secretary of the Climate Change Commission. We have with us hello.
I can hear you, Char. You're coming in clear.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry for that. So yes, to represent the Secretary of the Climate Change Commission, Secretary Emmanuel M. de Guzman, we have with us Mr. Ludwig O. Federingan of the CCC, who will be giving a short message on behalf of the Secretary. Turning over the floor to you, Mr. Ludwig.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Char. Okay, on behalf of the Climate Change Commission Secretary Emmanuel M. de Guzman, I would like to express our warmest thanks to the United Nations Development Program in the Philippines for inviting the Climate Change Commission to this virtual forum dedicated to our young people. This gathering takes place against the backdrop of the twin global disruptions, challenging not just our nation, but the globe. The COVID-19 pandemic and the prevailing climate crisis are both rooted in the abusive global economic system currently in place, a system that is reliant on unsustainable consumption and continued encroachment of natural resources. We are perennial witnesses that neither the virus nor greenhouse gases respect national boundaries, but both of them demand rapid and far-reaching action on an unprecedented scale. We see it now happening on COVID-19, but not yet on carbon emissions. And this gathering today is one important step forward, empowering young people like you to contribute to this pursuit. Having the most at stake in the fight for a more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable future, young people are mobilized for climate action on a scale that has never been seen before. As agents of change, the arena for your engagement in the sustainability movement is vast and full of possibilities. Among these are, first, considering that the climate crisis is now an everything issue, our youth should be part of government's environmental and climate change education. Becoming an advocate for sustainability is about engaging more people and mobilizing collaborators. The latest science warned that a further half degree of warming can bring unprecedented dangers to the world. Food and water will be scarcer, most of today's corals will die, diseases will prevail, poverty will worsen, and societal crisis will ensue. Rising sea levels will result in more destruction in coastal communities and will make a number of small islands disappear and uninhabitable. This is much more noticeable here given our nature as an archipelago. The projected increase in the number and the severity of tropical cyclones and typhoons visiting the country will increase the risk of flash floods and landslides and displace millions of Filipinos. The resolute and urgent response to the pandemic demonstrated the remarkable capacity of human society to put the emergency brake on the business as usual. It showed that we can act as one and radically change our ways and our systems to contain the rapid spread of a deadly virus for the greater good of all. The same unity, resolve, and urgency should be applied in combating the climate emergency and in pursuing sustainable development. We need significant transformation in the way human societies use the finite resources of this planet. Secondly, our youth can lead by example by living a sustainable lifestyle. Grow our own food, reduce food waste, go plastic free, boycott products that endangered wildlife, use energy efficient appliances and products, reduce carbon footprint. These are simple steps, but they provide a roadmap to a healthier and more environmentally sound lifestyle. Third and last, our youth demand more from government and private sector leaders. Demand them to heed science, make risk-informed decisions, and implement our environment and climate change laws. Our youth could be the pillars and the driving force in holding government, businesses, and the public to greater accountability and transparency. Your voices are critical in forging new pathways for development. That is why we enjoy the youth today to take active leadership role in their respective communities, network of friends, and organizations. In closing, the Climate Change Commission always pays tribute to the Filipino youth for lending their voices in the global movement for climate justice and sustainable development. It is with great pleasure that we take part in this event to further encourage the young people and young professionals to take a more active role in finding solutions to the growing social, economic, cultural, and development challenges caused by environmental degradation and disasters arising from hazards made even stronger by climate change. Far too many lives and livelihoods are lost, and it is infuriating to even think that those suffering the most severe consequences are those who have done the least to cause it. We therefore stand with the Filipino youth in demanding resolute and immediate actions from world leaders. Together with the Filipino youth, expect that the Climate Change Commission will continue to urge actions from our economic managers to ensure a green and sustainable economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We will continue to empower more young people to take an active role in advocating for a cleaner, greener, and more climate resilient future. Before I end, allow me to greet everyone in this gathering, a World Environment Day that we will celebrate tomorrow. And of course, we have to observe the Philippine Environment Month happening for the entire month of June. Maraming salamat at mabuhay po ang ating mga Pilipinong kabataan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ludwig. We appreciate the continued support of the CCC to the UNDP initiatives as well. And thank you so much for reiterating the important role of the youth in making the institutions accountable, especially for climate action. Before we close, we would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers, our panelists, our guests for joining the Youth for Climate Action Forum. And as we tackle this new age together, let us keep in mind that we have to work together in the pursuit for equity, innovation, and stewardship of nature. We need your support in order for us to be able to create the world we want and the future that we want. We are hashtag the generation restoration. So thank you so much, everyone. Please don't forget to join the Movers Workshop on Climate Action, which is happening on June 11, 2 to 4 p.m. You may already register. This is a special workshop to be hosted by none other than our youth engagement officer, Ms. Joanna Aroba as well. Joining this workshop will allow you to be part of the Movers Network as well. So please do so. And you will also learn more about what you can do to contribute to climate action in the Philippines. Again, thank you so much, everyone. Advanced Happy World Environment Day. We will be sending a newsletter to everyone who has registered, which will include the presentations of all of our panelists and the recording of this webinar as well. Again, maraming salamat po sa lahat. Magandang hapon. Salamat sa pakikinig at salamat sa mga tanong po na ipinadala nyo sa ating mga panelists and speakers. Magandang hapon, and let us continue to reimagine, recreate, and restore. Salamat po sa lahat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy World Environment Day.
Salamat po sa lahat.
Thank you to all. Thank you.